My name is Eleanor Hargrove. I'm 72 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that love meant staying quiet even when it hurt. That belief almost cost me everything. It was Thanksgiving afternoon. The dining room smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, and the faint trace of my daughter's expensive perfume. The table was set with the good china I'd inherited from my mother. The one thing I never let anyone else touch. Laughter floated around the room, but it felt forced, like a performance everyone had rehearsed except me. I was sitting at the head of the table, where I've sat for 40 years. My daughter Lydia, 38, beautiful and always in control, sat to my right. Her husband Marcus was beside her, checking his phone under the table like he usually did. My granddaughter Sophie, 14, sat across from me, quietly pushing green beans around her plate. A few cousins and close friends filled the other seats, all of them smiling like this was just another normal holiday. Then Lydia cleared her throat. "Mom," she said, her voice soft and sweet in that way she uses when she wants something. She reached into the leather tote bag she'd placed beside her chair and slid a thick envelope across the white tablecloth. "We've been thinking about you a lot lately. We toured a wonderful place last week. It's called Cedar Grove Residences. Assisted living, but it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like a resort for people who've earned their peace." The room went strangely quiet. Forks paused mid-air. I looked down at the glossy packet. On the front was a smiling silver-haired woman walking through a manicured garden. Inside, I already knew what I'd find: admission forms, cost breakdowns, and a suggested move-in date just 3 weeks away. I picked up my coffee cup, took a slow sip, and felt every eye in the room on me. The liquid was warm and bitter, just the way I like it. For a moment, I let the silence stretch. Then I set the cup down gently, looked my daughter straight in the eyes, and spoke in the calmest voice I could manage. "That's a lovely brochure, sweetheart. But I already toured your house last month. The one on Maple Ridge Lane. It's listed for sale now. The buyers want to close before Christmas." Her wine glass froze halfway to her lips. The color drained from her face so quickly I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Marcus's phone clattered onto the table. Someone at the far end of the table gasped. Sophie's eyes went wide, but I caught the tiniest flicker of a smile on her face. Lydia laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that cracked in the middle. "Mom, that's not funny. You can't be serious." I folded my hands on the table and smiled gently. The same way I used to smile at clients right before I closed a difficult escrow deal. "Oh, I'm very serious, Lydia, and that's only the beginning." Welcome back to Grace and Grit Stories, where the women the world tried to quietly erase finally stand up and speak. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you've ever been the one everyone assumed would just go along with their plans, then you're exactly who I made this story for. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from today. And if this already has you leaning in, hit subscribe and stay with me. Because what happened at that Thanksgiving table and everything that came after changed how I see love, family, and most importantly, myself. Let me tell you who I am, so the rest of this story lands exactly the way it should. I spent 25 years as a senior escrow officer. I read fine print for a living. I closed hundreds of homes, protected buyers and sellers, and learned one truth that never failed me. The name on the deed is the only name that matters. I thought I'd never have to use that lesson against my own blood. I was wrong. But before we get to how I quietly turned the tables, I need to take you back a little. Because none of this started at Thanksgiving. It started years earlier, when I made a choice out of love that would eventually force me to choose myself. I've lived in this same 2-story colonial house for 43 years. The oak floors still creak in all the familiar places, and every room carries memories I can almost touch. Some people see an old house that needs updating. I see a home I paid for with my own hands and heart after life tried to knock me down. My name is Eleanor Hargrove, but most people who've known me for decades just call me Ellie. At 72, I still drive myself to the grocery store, still balance my own checkbook, and still climb the stairs to my bedroom every single night. I don't move as fast as I used to, but my mind is sharper than ever. That's something my daughter and her husband seem to have forgotten. I live a quiet life now. Mornings are for coffee on the back porch, watching the birds fight over the feeder. Afternoons are for my garden or reading. Evenings are for Sophie when she comes over after school to do homework at my kitchen table. She's the one bright light that never dims. We talk about books, boys, and her dreams of becoming a writer someday. She tells me things she doesn't tell her mother anymore. Lydia, my only child, lives 10 minutes away in the beautiful house I helped her keep 12 years ago. She works as a marketing consultant, always busy with launches and client dinners. Marcus, her husband of 9 years, runs, or tries to run, a string of small businesses that never quite seem to work out. They have the perfect Instagram life, matching outfits, vacations, and carefully filtered smiles. But I've seen the cracks behind the filters. Lately, their visits had changed. They used to come for Sunday dinners and laugh easily. Now they came with questions wrapped in concern. Mom, are you still driving at night? Mom, don't you think the stairs are getting dangerous? Mom, we noticed you left the back door unlocked last week. I never left that door unlocked, but I stopped correcting them. Instead, I watched. I listened. And I started keeping a small notebook in the drawer by my bed. Dates, conversations, little things that didn't feel right. I told myself I was being paranoid. A mother shouldn't have to document her own family. But something in my gut, the same instinct that helped me catch errors in million-dollar closings for 25 years, whispered that something was very wrong. My days were still full. I volunteer at the local library twice a week, reading to the children's group. I have my bridge club on Thursdays and coffee with my oldest friend Marian every other Friday. Marian is the only person who's known me through every season of life. She's the one who told me last month, Ellie, they're circling. Don't ignore the signs. I laughed it off at the time, but deep down I knew she was right. This house is paid off. The garden is mine. The quiet life I built after losing my husband Richard, Sophie's grandfather, 24 years ago, is mine. I raised Lydia alone while working full-time. I sacrificed vacations, new clothes, and sometimes sleep just so she could have stability. I thought that kind of love would always be returned. I was slowly learning that some people see love as a one-way street. That Thanksgiving was supposed to be warm and grateful. Instead, it became the day I finally stopped pretending everything was fine. The day I decided that protecting my peace was no longer negotiable. If you've ever felt your own family slowly rewriting your story while you were still living it, you understand how heavy that moment felt. I sat there with that glossy brochure in front of me and realized something important. I had spent decades being the safe place for everyone else. It was time to become the safe place for myself. And that decision changed everything. Richard was the kind of man who made everyone feel safe. Tall, steady, with a quiet laugh that could fill a room. We met when I was 24, married a year later, and for 18 beautiful years we built a life together in this very house. He worked as an architect. I worked escrow. We dreamed about traveling when we retired. We wanted more children, but life had other plans. So we poured all our love into Lydia. Then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, everything ended. Richard was driving home from a site visit when a truck ran a red light. He was gone before the ambulance even reached the hospital. I was 48 years old, suddenly a widow with a teenage daughter, a mortgage, and a heart that felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. The first year was pure survival. I cried in the car between closings. I learned how to fix the leaky kitchen faucet because there was no one else to call. I sat at the dining table every night helping Lydia with homework while fighting the urge to fall apart. People kept telling me, "Time heals." They didn't understand that some wounds don't heal. They just teach you how to carry them. But I refused to let grief swallow us. I took every extra closing I could get. I worked weekends. I studied the market like my life depended on it. Because it did. Within 3 years, I had paid off the house. Within 5 years, I had bought my first small rental property. Then another. I became the woman who could read a contract upside down and spot a problem before anyone else even opened the file. Lydia watched all of it. At first, she was proud. Later, I think she started to take it for granted. The safety I built became the background of her life. Always there, always reliable, like electricity or running water. She never had to worry about losing the roof over her head because I made sure it could never happen. I never remarried, not because I didn't have chances, but because after Richard, I realized I had finally become the person I needed most. Strong, self-reliant, calm in a crisis. That version of me carried our family through the hardest years. By the time I turned 60, I had 3 rental properties, a paid-off home, and enough savings to actually enjoy my later years. I started traveling a little. I planted the rose garden, Richard, and I had always talked about. I thought I had earned my peace. But peace, I was about to learn, is something you have to keep protecting. Even from the people you love most. Looking back now, I can see the small shifts that happened. After Lydia married Marcus. The way she stopped asking how I was doing and started commenting on how I looked tired. The way Marcus began making little jokes about Mom's old-fashioned ways. I brushed it all off as normal family growing pains. I told myself I was being too sensitive. Marion warned me again and again. "Ellie, open your eyes. They're not worried about you. They're worried about what you have." I didn't want to believe her. A mother's heart will make every excuse in the world before it accepts a painful truth. But the notebook in my nightstand drawer kept getting fuller. And my heart kept getting heavier. That's how I entered my 72nd year. Still strong, still independent, but carrying a quiet unease I couldn't quite name. Until Thanksgiving made everything crystal clear. 12 years ago, my daughter's world fell apart in the most brutal way possible. Lydia was 26, married to her college sweetheart, and 8 months pregnant with Sophie. One evening, she showed up at my door with a black eye, a suitcase, and a heart that had been completely shattered. Her husband had cleaned out their joint accounts, maxed out every credit card, and disappeared with another woman. The house they were living in was underwater, and the bank was already starting foreclosure proceedings. I had never seen my daughter so broken. She sat on my kitchen floor that night, sobbing into my lap like she was 6 years old again. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I have nothing left." That night, I made a decision that would shape the next 12 years of both our lives. The very next morning, I called my old contacts in real estate. Within 48 hours, I found a beautiful 3-bedroom house on Maple Ridge Lane, solid neighborhood, good schools, perfect for a new mother. I bought it in cash, but I made one very important choice. I put the deed in my name only. I told Lydia it was a gift. I told her she could live there, rent-free, until she got back on her feet. I never asked her to sign anything. I never reminded her that the house wasn't actually her. I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted Sophie to grow up in a home that couldn't be taken away by anyone. For the first few years, it worked beautifully. Lydia got back on her feet. She met Marcus, they got married, and Sophie started kindergarten. The house became their home. Family photos filled the walls. Sophie learned to ride her bike in that driveway. I watched them build a life there, and felt nothing but gratitude that I had been able to provide that safety net. I visited often. I babysat Sophie almost every weekend. I helped with home repairs and never once mentioned whose name was on the deed. Love, I believed, didn't need receipts. But as the years passed, something slowly shifted. Lydia began referring to it as my house. Marcus started making comments about future renovations when it's officially ours. I stayed quiet. I told myself it didn't matter what they called it, as long as they were happy and safe. That was my mistake. I should have had the conversation. I should have reminded them gently that the house was my safety net too. My backup plan in case life ever knocked me down again. But I didn't want to seem petty. I didn't want to create tension. So I stayed silent, just like I had after losing Richard. I kept the original deed and all the paperwork locked away in my old cedar box upstairs, the same box that once held my mother's recipes and my wedding photos. I told myself I would never need to open it. Life has a way of proving us wrong when we're most certain. That house on Maple Ridge Lane, the one my daughter had come to see as her birthright, would become the very thing that forced me to finally speak up after 12 years of silence. And when I did speak, it would shake our entire family to its foundations. The 12 years after I bought that house became a masterclass in quiet love. I attended every school play, every soccer game, and every parent-teacher conference for Sophie. I cooked Sunday dinners and listened for hours while Lydia complained about work stress or Marcus's latest business idea. I was the reliable one, the one who never asked for anything in return. But slowly, the dynamic changed. Lydia stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as a resource. Calls became shorter. Visits became more transactional. The warm, "Thank you, Mom," turned into casual expectations. "Mom, can you watch Sophie this weekend? We have a work thing." "Mom, the AC is acting up again. Can you call someone?" I gave without hesitation. Because that's what mothers do, right? What I didn't realize was that my silence was teaching them that my boundaries didn't exist, that my generosity had no limit, that my home, my money, and my time were communal property. Marian tried to warn me during one of our coffee mornings. "Ellie, you're raising a child who never learned how to stand on her own because you keep catching her. One day she's going to push too far." I defended my daughter. She's been through a lot. She's doing her best. But deep down, I felt the growing distance. The way Lydia would roll her eyes when I talked about my garden or my volunteer work. The way Marcus would make jokes about the old lady who still uses a checkbook. They thought I didn't notice, but I noticed everything. Sophie was the only one who still saw me clearly. She would hug me tighter than necessary and whisper, "Grandma, are you okay? You look tired lately." That child has always had an old soul. The real shift happened about 18 months ago. Marcus's latest business, some kind of import-export venture, started failing. I overheard tense phone calls. I noticed Lydia's new habit of checking real estate prices on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. They began asking strange questions about my health, my doctors, whether I had updated my will. I still stayed quiet. I told myself it was paranoia. I told myself a daughter who once cried in my arms could never truly betray me. But the notebook in my drawer grew thicker. Dates, conversations, little red flags I could no longer ignore. My silence, which I once believed was love, had become a cage I built for myself, and my family was starting to test the bars. Thanksgiving wasn't the beginning of their plan. It was simply the day they decided to stop pretending. And it was the day I finally decided I would stop pretending too. The first undeniable crack appeared 3 months before Thanksgiving. I was at Lydia and Marcus's house, the house I bought, dropping off Sophie's forgotten backpack. I walked into the kitchen and heard them talking in the living room. Their voices were low, but the words carried clearly. "She's getting older, Marcus. We can't wait forever." The equity in that house alone could solve everything. Marcus replied, colder than I'd ever heard him, "We need a plan. Doctor visits, documented incidents, maybe even a competency evaluation. We do it right and the house transfers cleanly." I stood there frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. I quietly set the backpack down and left without saying goodbye. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on my back porch until sunrise, wrapped in Richard's old cardigan, thinking about every choice I had made for my daughter. The house. The silence. The endless giving. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, but clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't getting older. I was being targeted. The next few weeks confirmed it. More concerned visits. Questions about my memory. Suggestions that I should downsize for my own good. Lydia even casually mentioned touring nice communities for seniors. Each time I smiled politely and changed the subject, but inside, the woman who once closed million-dollar deals was waking up. The strategist, the closer, the one who knew how to wait, prepare, and strike at exactly the right moment. I started making calls, quiet ones. I scheduled a full medical evaluation with a respected geriatric specialist, not the doctor they kept recommending. I met with my estate attorney, an old friend who had handled my affairs for decades. I pulled the deed for the Maple Ridge house and stared at my name on it for a long time. The notebook became my private record. Every conversation, every red flag, every lie. My heart was breaking, yes, but beneath the heartbreak was something stronger, resolve. I had spent decades protecting my daughter. Now it was time to protect myself. By the time Thanksgiving arrived, I was no longer the quiet, accommodating mother they thought they knew. I was ready. The weeks between that kitchen conversation and Thanksgiving became a masterclass in how quietly betrayal can unfold. It started with phone calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. My cousin Denise called first, her voice dripping with concern. "Ellie, honey, Lydia told us you've been having some memory issues lately. We're all so worried about you." I kept my tone light. "Memory issues? I just beat Marion at bridge last week." "How are you doing, Denise?" The calls kept coming. Each one planted the same seeds. "Mom is slowing down. Mom forgets things. Mom shouldn't be living alone." Always delivered with love, of course. Then came the text messages from Lydia. "Mom, I noticed you seemed confused about Sophie's school schedule yesterday. Just want to make sure you're okay. Marcus and I found a beautiful community. They have gardening clubs. You'd love it." I screenshot every single one and saved them in a folder on my phone labeled simply, "Records." The most chilling moment came when I accidentally picked up a call from Marcus while he was on speaker with someone I didn't recognize. "We just need consistent documentation. Doctor notes, missed appointments, that kind of thing. Once we have enough, the guardianship process is straightforward." I hung up quietly before they noticed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anger that had finally found its target. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked. Something I had never done in my own home. I installed a small camera at the front door. Not because I thought they would break in, but because I no longer trusted what they might do when I wasn't looking. Sophie noticed the change in me. One afternoon while we were baking cookies, she asked quietly, "Grandma, why do Mom and Dad keep talking about moving you somewhere? You're not sick." I pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. Sometimes grown-ups make plans without asking the most important person. But don't worry, sweetheart. Grandma's got this. That was the first time I said it out loud. The promise I was making to myself. I met with my attorney Ruth the following week. We reviewed everything, the deed to the Maple Ridge house, my will, my trust documents, my medical records. Ruth looked at me across her desk and said, "Ellie, you have everything you need to protect yourself. The question is whether you're ready to use it." I was ready. Thanksgiving wasn't going to be a day of gratitude. It was going to be the day I stopped being their safety net and started being my own protector. The stage was set. The players were in position, and I, the woman who once closed deals in rooms full of men who underestimated her, was finally ready to play the game on my own terms. The real reason behind their plan wasn't cruelty. It was desperation. Marcus's latest business had collapsed spectacularly. I learned the details slowly through careful observation and a few well-placed conversations with people who still trusted me. Over $340,000 in debt. Investors threatening legal action. Their beautiful house, the one they thought was theirs, had a second mortgage they were struggling to pay. Lydia wasn't innocent either. She had enabled every bad decision, spending money they didn't have to maintain the image of success. Designer bags, luxury vacations, private schools for Sophie. All of it built on a foundation of sand. I became their exit strategy. They didn't see it as betrayal. In their minds, I had more than enough. I was old. I didn't need all that equity. I should be happy to help the family one last time. The nursing home idea wasn't just about getting me out of the way. It was about gaining legal control over my assets through guardianship. They had even consulted an elder law attorney who specialized in these cases. I know because I saw the invoice in Marcus's email when he accidentally left his laptop open during one visit. $8,500 already paid. The worst part wasn't the money. It was how systematically they tried to rewrite my story. They created a narrative. Eleanor is declining. Eleanor is confused. Eleanor can't be trusted with her own life. They documented small things. A forgotten birthday, a misplaced set of keys, a day I seemed off, and turned them into evidence. They were building a case against me while still eating my cooking and accepting my help with Sophie. What hurt most was realizing how long this had been brewing. The concern about my safety wasn't new. It was a campaign, and I had almost fallen for it because I loved my daughter. But love stopped being blind the night I stood in that hallway and heard them planning my future without me in it. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I did what I do best. I prepared. I documented. I strengthened every legal protection I had. And I waited for the right moment to remind them exactly whose name was on the deed of the house they called home. Thanksgiving was going to be that moment. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, they called a family meeting at my house. Lydia said it was just to check in on everyone. But I knew better. When I opened the door, 6 people were already in my living room. Lydia, Marcus, 2 of my cousins, Marion, who I had invited myself, and a man I didn't recognize wearing an expensive suit. "Mom, this is David Kessler," Lydia said brightly. "He's a senior care consultant. He's just here to listen." I smiled politely and offered everyone coffee. I let them talk. For nearly an hour, they painted a picture of a frail, confused old woman who needed protecting. They mentioned incidents I barely remembered or that had never happened. They talked about how the stairs in my house were dangerous, how I seemed withdrawn lately. Marion watched me the entire time, her eyes sharp. When they finally asked for my thoughts, I simply said, "I appreciate everyone's concern. I'll think about it." The pressure built in the days that followed. Daily texts, drop-in visits. Even Sophie was being used as an unknowing messenger. "Grandma, Mom says you should rest more." I felt the emotional weight of it every single day. There were moments I sat in my quiet kitchen and wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe I was getting older. Maybe they really were worried. Then I would open the cedar box and look at the deed with my name on it. I would read the medical report from my independent doctor declaring me fully competent. And the doubt would fade. The night before Thanksgiving, Lydia sent one final text. "We love you, Mom. We just want what's best for you. Please keep an open mind tomorrow." I replied with 3 simple words. I always do. I slept better that night than I had in months. Because I finally understood the game, and I was no longer playing defense. While they were building their case, I was quietly building mine. I became a careful observer of my own family. I noted patterns. Marcus's late-night phone calls, Lydia's sudden interest in my banking apps, the way they both avoided talking about their financial problems in front of me. I met with Ruth again and updated my revocable trust, naming Sophie and Marion as co-trustees alongside my attorney. I completed a full neuropsychological evaluation that came back better than average for my age. Every document was dated, notarized, and stored safely. I even spoke with the real estate agent, who had originally helped me buy the Maple Ridge house. We reviewed the listing options quietly. I didn't list it yet, but I wanted to know exactly what it was worth in today's market. The most painful part was watching Sophie caught in the middle. She started spending more time at my house, almost like she was seeking shelter. One evening she told me, "Grandma, sometimes I hear them arguing about money. They say you don't need all this space anymore." I hugged her and whispered, "Some battles are for grown-ups, sweetheart, but I promise you, Grandma is going to be just fine." By the time Thanksgiving arrived, I had everything I needed. The cedar box on my dresser was no longer just a memory box. It had become my armor. I dressed carefully that morning, a soft cream sweater, my favorite pearls, and the calmest expression I could wear. I cooked the turkey exactly the way my family liked it. I set the table beautifully. Because if they wanted to play power games at my table, I was going to remind them exactly who built the table in the first place. The trap was set. The only question left was how they would react when the jaws finally closed. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, while my family was building their narrative, I was constructing something far more powerful. Undeniable proof. My first appointment was with Dr. Rebecca Lang, a highly respected geriatric neuropsychologist. I didn't tell Lydia or Marcus. I drove myself to the appointment, spent 3 hours doing every test they could throw at me. Memory, executive function, problem-solving, spatial awareness. When the results came back 2 days later, Dr. Lang smiled and said, "Eleanor, you're in the top percentile for your age group. There is 0 evidence of cognitive decline." I had that report sealed and dated. Next was Ruth's office. We spent an entire afternoon going through every asset I owned. We updated my revocable living trust. We created a durable power of attorney that specifically excluded Lydia and Marcus. We made sure the Maple Ridge house remained fully protected under the trust. I also had a new will drafted. Sophie was protected. Marion was named as guardian for any potential decisions. Everything was locked down so tightly that even the best elder law attorney would have a difficult time challenging it. The most important document, however, was the one I kept in the cedar box. The original deed to the house on Maple Ridge Lane. My name. My signature. My protection. I spent many quiet evenings reviewing everything. I wasn't doing this out of revenge. I was doing it out of self-respect. After a lifetime of putting everyone else first, I was finally putting myself on the list. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat at my kitchen table with all the papers spread out in front of me. I touched each one like old friends. Then I carefully placed them back in the cedar box, closed the lid, and whispered to myself, "I've done everything I can. Now it's time to see who they really are." I slept peacefully that night. The next day, I welcomed my family into my home with a warm smile and a heart that was finally ready for whatever came next. Thanksgiving dinner had been pleasant on the surface. The food was excellent. The conversation stayed light until dessert. That's when Lydia slid the envelope across the table. After I delivered my calm response about the house being listed, the room erupted in chaos. Lydia's face went from shock to anger. Marcus tried to laugh it off as a misunderstanding. The cousins looked uncomfortable. But I wasn't finished. I stood up slowly, walked to the sideboard, and brought back the cedar box. I placed it gently on the table in front of me. "Since we're all being honest today," I said calmly, "I think it's time we looked at a few documents together." I opened the box and took out the first paper. The original deed to the Maple Ridge house. "This house," I said, holding it up so everyone could see. "The one you've lived in for 12 years has always been in my name. I bought it to protect you and Sophie when you had nothing. I never asked for anything in return. But I never transferred ownership either." The silence in the room was deafening. Lydia's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, you can't be serious." I looked at her with more sadness than anger. "I've never been more serious in my life." I then laid out the medical report, the updated trust documents, and the letter from my attorney confirming everything was legally locked down. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of my own power. Not the power to hurt them, but the power to protect myself. I had spent decades doubting whether I was enough. In that moment, holding those papers, I finally understood that I had always been enough. The game had changed, and this time I was the one writing the rules. The real confrontation happened after dinner, when everyone moved to the living room. Lydia was shaking with rage. "You listed my house? How dare you?" I remained seated, calm as still water. "It was never your house, Lydia. It was always mine. I let you believe it was yours because I loved you. That was my mistake." Marcus tried to take control. "This is ridiculous. We can challenge this. You're clearly not in the right state of mind." I smiled sadly and placed Dr. Lang's report on the coffee table. "Actually, I had a full evaluation last month. I'm sharper than most people half my age. Would you like to see the results?" One by one, I laid out every document: the trust, the power of attorney, the market analysis showing the Maple Ridge house was worth significantly more than they realized, the real estate listing agreement I had signed the week before. The cousins who had come to support Lydia slowly went quiet. Marian sat with quiet pride. Sophie watched everything with wide eyes. Lydia started crying, not the soft tears of remorse, but the angry tears of someone who realized their plan had completely collapsed. "You're punishing me," she sobbed. "After everything I've done for you." I looked at my daughter with a mixture of love and exhaustion. "No, sweetheart, I'm not punishing you. I'm teaching you that love has boundaries. I gave you safety for 12 years. I will always love you, but I will no longer allow you to take advantage of me." Marcus stood up, grabbed his coat, and left without another word. Lydia followed soon after, still crying. The room slowly emptied until only Sophie, Marian, and I remained. Sophie came and hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Grandma." That night, after everyone had gone, I sat in my quiet house and finally let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from release. The weight I had carried for years was finally gone. I had faced my family's betrayal and chosen myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The weeks after Thanksgiving were some of the hardest and most liberating of my life. The Maple Ridge house received multiple offers and sold quickly. The new family moved in just before Christmas. I made sure Lydia had 30 days to move out, and I helped pay for a moving company as a final gesture. Lydia didn't speak to me for nearly a month. When she finally called, it was full of accusations and self-pity. I listened quietly, then said, "I love you, but I will no longer rescue you from choices you made. It's time for you to stand on your own." Marcus disappeared from the picture almost entirely. Last I heard, he had moved to another state to start over. Sophie chose to stay with me more often. She became my greatest comfort and my biggest reason for staying strong. We redecorated one of the guest rooms together and made it hers. Some cousins reached out with awkward apologies. A few stayed silent. Marian, of course, was there every step of the way, proud as could be. The most surprising reaction came from Lydia herself. Months later, she sent a long message admitting that she had been scared and desperate. She didn't fully apologize, but she acknowledged that she had crossed a line. I replied with kindness but firmness. Some relationships can heal, but they can never go back to what they were. I kept the cedar box on my nightstand now. It no longer held fear. It held proof of my strength. I had won, not by destroying my family, but by refusing to let them destroy me. Today, almost a year later, I sit on my back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the same birds fight over the feeder. The house feels lighter. My heart feels lighter. I've learned that love without boundaries is not love. It's self-abandonment. I spent decades thinking that being a good mother meant giving everything, even when it hurt me. I was wrong. True love sometimes means saying no. It means protecting your peace. It means teaching people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. Sophie is thriving. She writes stories now, many of them inspired by what happened in our family. She tells me often, "Grandma, you showed me what strength looks like." Lydia and I have a careful, polite relationship. We see each other on holidays. We talk about safe topics. The deep trust we once had is gone, but perhaps something new and more honest can grow in its place. I pray for her growth every day. As for me, I travel when I want. I garden, I read, I volunteer. I live fully in the years I have left, without guilt and without apology. If you're listening to this story and you're in a similar situation, feeling invisible, underestimated, or slowly erased by the people who should cherish you most, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose your peace. The name on the deed of your life should be your own. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it touched something in your heart, type the word boundaries in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the quiet ones who prepare are often the strongest ones in the room. This is Eleanor Hargrove signing off with a full heart and a steady hand. Until next time, stay strong, stay calm, and never forget whose name is on your deed.